What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here. You know what this is. It's another Soprano log. Season 2, Episode 3. Side note, if you're confused about the title of the episode is Toodle-Fucking-Oo, but I'm worried that YouTube might flag the video or something if I put the F word in the title. So that's why it's Toodle-Oo on this video. But just know that the real title is Toodle-Fucking-Oo. I've been waiting for this episode for a long time because it introduces one of my favorite characters of all time. So let's get into it. So Richie Aprile is Jackie's older brother. He's been in prison for the last 10 years, but he's released. The first thing he does is he goes and visits Beansy Gaeta. Beansy owns some pizza joints. He used to run drugs for Jackie and Richie, but when they went away, he invested his money into the pizza places, and now he's a legitimate businessman. He has a close relationship with Tony Soprano, so when Richie goes and tries to shake Beansy down, Beansy refuses. He says that he's not just going to roll over. Richie reacts very violently to this. He smashes a coffee pot into Beansy's face and hits him with a chair. And we can tell that right off the bat that Richie has some anger problems, some resentment problems from being in prison. Meanwhile, Tony is called by a cop on his payroll to his mother's house. Meadow was throwing a party there. The house is destroyed. There's puke everywhere. One of the kids OD'd. Meadow was not on drugs, but she was drunk, and she just kind of refuses to take responsibility. Tony and Carmela debate how they should punish her, but they're kind of scared because with the modern laws, they can't really do anything to her. And they're actually living in fear of her a little bit and of her realizing that they really don't have any power over her as a modern kid. But Meadow kind of manipulates them. She actually suggests what the punishment should be. So she loses her credit card for 3 weeks. But it's great because when they take the credit card away, now they have to pay her an allowance to get gas and do stuff with. So it's great. She basically manipulated her parents into paying her for being in trouble. Meadow's just, she's as scheming as her father, and it's great to see that here. Janice is originally supportive of Meadow, her whole hippie freedom, treat kids with respect mentality, but she gets pissed off when she sees the state of the house, because that's her house now, or at least she's going to live in it with Livia. So she goes over to Tony and Carmela and starts yelling about them, about their parenting style. This upsets Tony and Carmela, and they finally snap at her and tell her to just, mind her own business. Don't get involved with their children. Janice decides she's going to move out from the Soprano house, but later Carmela kind of convinces her to stay. They kind of patch things up. And this is the first instance where we're mentioned that Janice has a son, Harpo, later named Hal, who lives in Montreal with his father. Even though Janice makes up an excuse about the dad took the son away, I kind of get the feeling that Janice just basically abandoned her son. She hasn't really made any attempt to be a mother, and that fits with her character. Speaking, though, of children and families, we get an interesting detail here that I noticed for the first time, which is that Tony mentions that Carmela has a sister. I looked this up. Apparently, he mentioned it a couple of times before, but I didn't notice it. We are never shown this sister ever. She's never mentioned by the parents. But she is mentioned a couple of times in dialogue. So I guess she just, lives somewhere else, doesn't interact with the family. I guess that makes sense because Tony has a sister, Barbara, who also doesn't really interact with the Soprano family. But at least we see her a couple times. But that's just a weird little detail I noticed. So later, Tony is at dinner with, his mob friends, and Melfi is there too with some of her friends. She's a little bit drunk, and they run into each other. And Tony doesn't really want to acknowledge her because he's trying to hide the fact that she was his psychiatrist. And also, I think he's still a little upset that she refused to see him. And so his friends kind of just assume that's one of his girlfriends. And they kind of bust his balls about it a little bit. But he's kind of embarrassed and doesn't really want to talk to her. Melfi's embarrassed as well. She says, as she's leaving, Toodle-Oo, which is where the title comes from. And later, when she's talking to her psychiatrist, she's wondering why she did that. And she thinks it's because she feels guilty about not treating Tony. And by acting like a little girl, it was her way to kind of escape responsibility. And we do see later that she has a dream about Tony having a panic attack on the road, crashing into a car and dying. So we can see that she does feel responsible for Tony and kind of feels guilt for cutting him out of the therapy process. Tony later has a welcome party for Richie at the Bada Bing. It's funny, we actually see the bad comedian who we saw in season 1. He was doing stand-up for at the old folks' home, and he was just as terrible as he was here. But it's funny they brought him back. So Richie's getting some money from the other mobsters, but Richie's kind of obsessed with Beansy. He has all this negative feelings towards him, and is just kind of harboring all this resentment because Beansy's kind of successful, and Richie's been stuck in prison all this time. There's also a little detail I noticed too, which is that Richie gets a blowjob from one of the strippers at the Bada Bing, but he can't. I guess he can only finish in the dark, or maybe he couldn't finish at all. I couldn't really tell what they were implying there, but basically he's got trouble having relations with women. Some people I think have suggested that this is because he's gay, or maybe because he was in prison and he was having sex with guys. I don't really know, but we can definitely see that he's got some issues. We would see that later with him and Janice, that he's got some sexual proclivities. But mostly, I think it's just Richie is obsessed with violence, and that's why he goes after Beansy. He runs Beansy over with his car and paralyzes him. Tony goes to visit Beansy in the hospital, and the doctors are basically saying that Beansy might never walk. And we do see that in season 6, that he's still in the wheelchair for life. So Tony reprimands Richie for the attack, and warns him that if Richie ever crosses him as boss, there's going to be trouble. He has this great line. He says, I'm the motherfucking one who calls the shots. Just great little bit of dialogue there. Richie has some great bit of dialogue too, because Tony was saying, I thought I told you to back the fuck off, Beansy. And Richie's like, I did. Then I put it in drive. It's just a really funny line. And I got to say here that the reason I love Richie so much is the actor, David Proval. He is just fantastic. Even though he's a short guy, Gandolfini towers over him. His eyes, he just has this really menacing look to him. And it's just perfect for this character. I love seeing him and Tony interact because Richie has incredible moxie for his size, as Junior says. But Richie actually goes and talks to Junior at the doctor's office, and he's kind of laying hints that he doesn't want to take orders from Tony. Tony's younger than Richie is, and Richie does not feel comfortable taking orders from him. He mentions actually to Tony about he saved Tony from when him and Jackie stuck up Feach LaManna's card game. This is the first time that's referenced, and they would expand this story later on in later seasons. But basically, Richie feels kind of passed over. He feels like he's not getting the respect and the benefits he deserves for being in prison all this time, and he's kind of starting to resent Tony as the boss. So we can see this is absolutely going to lead to trouble. But Richie also is trying to start up a relationship with Janice again. They dated when Tony was younger. Richie goes to yoga class with Janice. He's kind of into Eastern philosophies now. He read about them a lot in prison, and Janice is of course into that as well. And it kind of starts to look like they're gonna pick things back up and get back together. So that's pretty much what happens in this episode. The last little bit at the end is Tony goes to Livia's house and sees Meadow there of her own accord cleaning up. She heard that Janice was mad about the whole thing, and she takes responsibility and goes down there and cleans it, which is really interesting. As spoiled and selfish as Meadow is, and she is, because we see her earlier in this episode making a mess in their kitchen, talking shit about her parents, not really caring. She does take responsibility when it's needed, and she goes there of her own accord. So much respect to Meadow for that. She's trying to make it right. So Tony's a little confused when he sees that, because he's just not expecting Meadow to be responsible at all. But it's just an interesting detail. So yeah, great episode, great introduction of one of my favorite characters, and can't wait to see more of him next episode. Stay tuned for the next Soprano log coming soon.